Let's talk about the good, the bad and the ugly with our esteemed guests today. Luka Lisjak Gabrijecic is a Slovenian historian, political analyst, essayist and translator. He is the editor of the journal Razpotja and a member of the Eurozine editorial board. Mustafa Ünlü is a documentary filmmaker, a journalist and a publisher from Turkey. He's a pessimist about new technologies and its effect on humans, but he hopes that it has red lines to stop the hazard at some point. Miriam Rasch is a writer and philosopher who publishes about ethics and technology, media and literature. She works as research educator at the Willem de Kooning Academy in Rotterdam, the Netherlands, and her book on ethics in the age of dataism is titled Friction and was published in a gazillion languages. Very welcome all of you, Miriam and gentlemen. And I want to start with Miriam because your fabulous book, Friction, published in a gazillion languages by now, including my very useful Hungarian mother tongue. In there you lay out a very strong vision, sort of like a moral analysis of what direction we're heading in, and you have strong criticisms towards the visionaries of this field. Can you tell us about Friction and your understanding of automated decisions?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. I just wanted to start with stating the obvious, perhaps, which is technology is never neutral and AI is not a neutral tool. So how AI came about is, of course, by churning, digesting huge archives that make up the language model that is behind, if we're talking about the language AI. And these are the archives of all our collective works published on the internet. And that already tells you a little bit of, where the tool comes from, what it does, how it was conceived and what it is put on earth for. And I think one of the interesting things, for example, is that in these archives of generative language AI, it's made up of news mediums, journalism, but also of Reddit posts, of Wikipedia, of like our collective shit posting over the years. And all of these inputs are treated as equal. It's also important to think about how the reader is gonna deal with the output. So there can be a lot of output using AI, but is the reader gonna discern it? Is the reader gonna care? What is an interesting point is that there's a lot of talk about using AI as a tool. Obviously, in journalism, we don't want AI to take over the role of the journalist, but maybe it can be a helpful tool. So first, it's not a neutral tool, but second, I think that the technology that is offered to us is not meant to be, in many cases, a tool. It's meant to take over. So if you want to use AI to reach your readers or to cater to their needs or whatever, it's good to remember that, for example, where we see AI being used as in ChatGPT, that is not meant to help you reach the reader. It's meant to keep the reader within the confines of ChatGPT, or even Google, which is turning from a search engine into like an answering engine. So you don't search on Google anymore, but you ask a question and get the answer, which is conceived, used all the information that we produced on the internet. But it's not meant to direct traffic towards the sources. It's a source in itself.
Yeah, so when you say that, we always have to think about what we want to accomplish with our writing, with our publishing. And I'm always sent back to this question, what do we, by the way, want to accomplish by generative AI? Because there's always the tall tales of promising you the entire world and it's going to be so much better. We heard these promises in the 90s about the internet, and that's not particularly what came of it. So I think it's always important to tell actual predictions or visions from marketing bullshit. Since you are very critical, Mustafa, I know you're quite pessimistic about this. Let me go to the one sort of more upbeat guy here, Luka. What is the actual sort of inherent promise of this technology that we can expect?
Let me take a step backward. I'm a historian after all, and it's a bad habit to quote oneself, but I cannot but remember a text that I wrote back in 2017. Back then, you might remember it was the anniversary of the Reformation of Luther's 95 Theses. And I wrote a text saying, if you go now back and read Luther's 95 Theses, you will be struck by how boring and uninteresting they are for the modern writer. How little you understand, because these are quite esoterical and finely attuned theological discussions.
It's because he didn't take writing classes from you, that's all. It's just a stylistic thing.
Thank you, but it is not.
Or
it
me.
is also a matter
of
a different content. But my point was different. There is a chasm separating us, and that a chasm that is separating us from 1517, it's significantly bigger than the chasm that is separating us for a generation of writers later, especially in terms of style. What happened between really the massification of print happened. And to understand the Reformation, it's not so much about the theological content which was fought over, which is surely extremely important, but the fact that this new technology, the print, enabled something, really a revolutionary transformation. And the print back then really transformed the society as well. It was definitely, as Miriam said, the medium was not neutral. Suddenly the word was accessible to the masses as it had not been never before. And for sure you can actually see the change in the tone and in the quality. I for sure believe that there were cultural pessimists, and of course there were cultural pessimists back then in the 16th century who might have thought, oh my God, what has this print done to us, And it is true. The print, the advent of print, was absolutely necessary to understand the religious wars, the upheavals, which somehow are almost like a reflection of what would come later. These great theological struggles that engulfed Europe and that now engulfed all the regions of the world. But there was no way back. With internet before, and now even more with artificial intelligence, with generative and non-generative artificial intelligence, we are in this point of history in which we should contemplate what is being lost. Depth is being lost, reflexivity is being lost, and we have to fight against it. But it's also a technology that is bound to transform a lot of societies. So just engaging in cultural pessimism is not going to be enough.
What I'm reminded all the time is that we talk about technological changes afterwards, or we oftentimes teach technological changes and discuss them in public discourse like it's a specific point in time. You cite Luther, we talk about Gutenberg, we appoint these arbitrary points in time. They are only handrails for us to kind of understand the time dimensions of the transformation, right? So it's not like Gutenberg invents something like in a movie and then suddenly the world revolves around its corners. Mustafa, I know that you have huge criticism about the introduction of these tools, not even necessarily in journalism, but competing with journalism.
It's very ironic, maybe. Last week, the Nobel Prize went to physicians working on AI, and one of them is Geoffrey Hinton. He's the godfather. He's named as the godfather of AI, which expressed his regrets. In terms of journalism, the problem is, I think, it's not what AI can capable to do or not. The problem is, are we going to be satisfied with that?
Yes.
Its capabilities. There is a limit, I believe, in terms of some areas, and journalism is one of them, because you need human touch in journalism. Another thing, for example, how I can trust a thinking creature which doesn't have ability to empathy.
Now, if you like what you see, and if we manage to make you laugh at least once, please support our work and go to patreon.com/Eurozine. This is the magazine presenting this show. You can pledge as little as €5 a month, or whatever you can afford, and you'll get access to bonus materials, early access, and even get to suggest topics and questions. I'm not particularly convinced that creativity is the one thing we should be mostly concerned about. It is more empathy and responsibility, right?
Correct.
And I'm often reminded how weirdly we thematize this, that media consumption today is way more personality driven than, let's say, 2 decades ago. And maybe this attachment to personalities, which is why we show the faces of our editors so that people actually understand who's bringing them the content that we are offering. Maybe this is a weird, almost hipsterish sort of backlash that you want to attach to people, you want to grow trusting relationships with them.
Now, we know that, for example, it's already able to do this AI tools. They're using these tools for some kind of news gathering. I'm a documentary filmmaker, and to make a good documentary film, a touching, a dramatic film, you have to spend months. You have to live with your object, your character.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Just for one moment, sometimes. Just one moment, you have to be in the right place on the right time, so that you can get the story and get the drama in the story. It's a touching point. Well, I mean, I'm pretty not sure that AI will go for that. I mean, AI can get it. It needs a connection between my character. It needs a trust between my character. And I have to be, in ethical point of view, as much as I get into their lives, but they're intimately, but I have to keep something out of it.
I wouldn't really take issue with the so-called donkey work, grueling, monotone work, being outsourced to machines, which, you know, AI arguably is. So, for instance, large data analysis in investigative journalism or data journalism. I think the problem, at least in my head, is on the investors and the employer side, because we can very much rethink how we organize work, and humans are extremely good at finding meaning and meaningful solutions to new situations. Employers aren't. And investors aren't, and governments often aren't, because ultimately one promise in there that we don't openly talk about, but it's always inherent in tech bro talk, is that you will be able to lay off so many people. And that's also happening, for instance, in the tech sector. Miriam, you write in your book about the sort of automation of decisions and how they are channeled into narrower and narrower paths. How do you think this works in the tech investor side? And what do you think we could expect in terms of how work transforms?
The AI also is not neutral because it's a business model, right? It's conceived by tech companies that are themselves financed in a certain way with angel investors and stuff like this. I mean, there's huge money going around in the whole AI business, while it's not giving back, I think, as much as is promised. So it will need to start, give a return on investment. The word that keeps returning in my mind, also listening to you talk, is a term that a colleague of mine, Florian Kramer, wrote an interesting essay on, which is crapularity. So we were promised singularity which is the computers becoming more intelligent than us. What we get is crapularity, which is humans becoming as stupid as the computer. We get these hallucinations by AI systems and we take them for granted. We go to Google to ask a question. We are told that we can put gasoline on our pizza for better taste. I mean, some people might even do it, you know. Some people started drinking bleach to fight COVID. A lot of the promises, indeed, it's like with social media, you know, the promise of social media was that we would all be connected, we would have friends, the world would become a better place, world peace is possible if we are all Facebook friends. But of course, you know, if you look into, let's say, the data and the history, that that was not why the social media were conceived of in the first place. It's always also about money and business and making a profit, and especially in the US business models, I think. So I also believe that the promise of AI, that it will give us, you know, the solution to climate change, to all the wicked problems we face, to the polycrisis, whatever, it's a false promise. That's not what it really is about. So we also shouldn't think that is what we're gonna get. Usually, I can be a little bit optimistic because I do believe in human skills, let's say. So the crapularity threat is that we dumb down to the level of the computer. And I mean, that happens, I guess, but it's not inevitable, that part of the story. I agree with Mustafa. I mean, there's stuff like the human voice, empathy, like connections, not in the sense of Facebook friends, but in the human sense. And this is something that the computer can't do yet, the AI can't do yet, and it's where we could do better. And what I also try to do is like, okay, let's learn from AI about what people wish or what they would like. And as an educator, it's of course a big problem in education that students use ChatGPT for writing papers and so on. They don't want to sit and do the work, but also they just want to, they want to be explained stuff, and they want to be able to, you know, ask about details. They want a conversational tone. And these are things that we maybe can learn something from. Yeah, grounds for some optimism there, because students, of course, they also want to be efficient. Readers, they want to know answers. They want like bullet points. What should I know? But there's also a need indeed for voice, ethical reflection, connection, and so on. So I think that is maybe where we can move forward.
You know, back in my day, students didn't used to use ChatGPT for their seminar papers. Back in my day, we used to just simply plagiarize from our peers. That was a different time. And I think at this point we can admit we all use automatic translation to some extent. The subtitles of this show are partially automatically translated into 15 languages. And in some of those are supervised and edited by professional translators. Luka, you guys at Razpotja, especially working across so many languages, you were early adopters. Can you tell us about your experience in, we're talking quality publishing, so we're not talking crap translation just thrown there.
Well, I have to correct you a bit. I think that we still by far rely on human translators. Although my experience as an editor with this non-generative AI, this new generation of translators, which have transcended and they're much better than the good old Google Translate, is that it's true, it's very good, but I think that it's as good as it gets. I know that it's always difficult, always like very tricky with technology to say something like that, because we always say, aha, this is it, we cannot improve, and then we always find that it can do something that we did not expect. these new tools of automatic translation, of artificial machine translations, are very good, but they're as good as average translators.
Yeah.
And I don't think they can reach the level of a good translator. They do help the editors. In the old days, we would ask a student, can you Czech, for example, can you translate this text from Czech? And we would not have anybody else, and then we would have to go through, edit, see what, it's all Slavic languages.
That's what we used to call a raw translation,
yes,
that then is
exactly.
sort of supervised and edited.
Exactly.
Yes.
So and in any case, it still needs to go through editing. And what AI can do, it's like to cut through this intermediate phase.
Hey, if you like thoughtful conversations with smart people, check out the podcast Talk Eastern Europe with our partners and friends at the journal New Eastern Europe. They talk about everything regional, politics and culture and more, with fantastic interviews. So we highly recommend them. Talk Eastern Europe. And now back to the program. What language does, and especially generational language, but not only generational language, subcultures as well, is that once styles and meanings get established, language, as creativity usually, starts to play around it, yes, and find different ways, because it's a living thing. And stylistically, you want to be inventive and you want to signal your position. These are the kinds of, I think, stylistic nuances that you understand even if you don't understand the concept, because you feel it. You grow up with this, you go through this as a kid and sort of, especially in puberty. But you won't feel it if you don't have that kind of frame of reference.
What Luka said remind me something. Once in television, there's a dubbed American movie on air, and there was a scene that a woman and man, woman asked, would you like whiskey on the rocks? And the man says, okay, let's go to rocks to drink whiskey. So, I mean, this is. I mean, it also needs some life experience, of course. This translator probably never drinks whiskey, so I mean, this is something like that. Actually,
but allow me. This is something that AI can easily translate. But could the AI make this sort of joke? Maybe. But I think there is still like then there is a meta level. Then you can joke on it. Then you can include it in many layers of double entendre, and this is something that is, I think, specifically human. It's a good news for editors. It's a good news for good translators. But there is the catch, and this is, I think, the danger, that many of the text will be translated by artificial intelligence, will be good enough, but will be lazy, bad translations. And we are back to something that Miriam pointed out, and we haven't talked about it enough, the economic aspect, that it will be simply cheaper to produce something which is good enough. Mm-hmm. And we will significantly lower the quality. And we know as editors that it's very important in what we do, also to a certain sense to, I don't like this term, but let's say educate the readership, or tell the reader, look, you can do better, you maybe you want better, and then the reader at certain point says, yeah, actually I do. So you always have to create your own audience, and I'm afraid that since the economic aspect, since it's going to be so much cheaper to do it with AI, in translation, in text and so on, it's going to flatten out lower, because this is what people are going to be served, and this is what will counter, and they will lose the taste for nuance. They will lose the taste for more sophisticated content.
I want to take issue with this because I really strongly feel that it's not the audience's expectations that define this process. We always cite what people watch, but what people watch and what they reach, what's offered to them, is extremely tailored. So it could be tailored into a direction of demanding more quality.
I agree.
Of developing secondary competence. We call it secondary competence in, for instance, dealing with much older registers of text,
yes,
which you don't sort of speak per se, but you learn to have some kind of a feel for, I don't know, like language historians, for instance. You can grow this layer of literacy for reading machine translation, but in order for this to happen, there are a lot of human decisions that have to precede this. And here I come back to priorities and policies, and especially the willingness to actually insist on people staying in these positions of responsibility. For some reason, and it has been my impression for a long time, the thing that people with great amounts of money hate the most is paying wages to others for work. I don't understand why. Paying wages is my best day in the month. I love it. I love paying people for their work. But it is possible, like this can be a decision that you insert this layer of ensuring quality, you insert legal guarantees, policies, frameworks, technology to make sure that when Google tries to become this closed ecclesia, which we come back to Reformation, but that's basically what they're building. They're building a closed universe that you don't exit. That's what Facebook is doing with penalizing external links. That's what Twitter is doing, penalizing external links. They want you to stay in there. There is a point of intervention, and I don't think it's impossible. We always talk about these in terms of really determination. I don't think it's predetermined, is it?
One of the things that is hated at least as much as paying a decent wage is our imagination. Yeah, we can try to teach our readers or our students to do it, but it's going against like what the technology is there for. So my biggest concern is that while obviously translation technology is a very useful tool, and it can actually help like multilingualism, but it goes completely beyond the notion of what translation of literature entails, like all these things we've been talking about indeed. The commercial AI technology is never gonna be meant to make literary translation because there's no money in it. And I'm wondering, how can we, especially in the field of translation, like use the benefits of it while not forgetting what indeed like real quality translation actually entails, like, and that entails time and experience and all these things.
For example, cinema is on the line now. I mean, the next step for the AI will, because they can create characters, they can create the stages, everything, and write the scenario as well. But we know that for decades, for the Hollywood cinema is, of course, best-selling cinema, and makes films with shablons, movies with shablons in several genres. But we have to consider Kurosawa, we have to consider Nuri Bilge Ceylan. I mean, lots of art. Never can get that level. And how can we expect from AI on this? Finally, on journalism, back to journalism, the risk is there. I mean, you can pump in the market this kind of Hollywood, AI movies with the shablons, with different characters and stages, or the level of journalism we are mentioning. And of course, I believe the real journalists will exist because they will make more human stories, more reportage, which is reportage you need to take the pulse of the people on the street, wherever it is. But the risk is if they will be called as rebel journalists.
How difficult it is, for example, to translate poetry. And you might think, oh, this is something that AI is the last thing that it will be able to do. But no, look at the old poetry, hexameter, rhymes. This, when you're translating this and you want to keep the original form, you have to know a lot of mathematical, which are the words that I could use that fit this translation. This is mathematics, especially old poetry is mathematics. I mean, the classical one, the Greek and Roman especially. And this, if it's tailored, if it's well designed, can be extremely useful for translators of poetry. You don't need to search in your language, how can I fit the meaning into this structure with rhymes, with hexameters, or anything. You can search. You can search and it gives you a list of words. This I could use. But then you still need the human, you definitely need the human translator to say, among these options, which now I did not search my memory or very specific dictionaries, but I can find it in a second. Among these options, I am still the one who has to choose the one that fits better the meaning. And not just the meaning, but the period, all these other nuances, which, however, I think AI cannot get. And so I think that we do have a lot of space for AI to help us doing really meaningful job in a better way.
I mean, the problem is who will be the boss, who will be the tool.
Absolutely, yeah.
Ultimately.
Well, we have to fight. That's why we have to fight with artificial intelligence to keep to remain in charge. And it's not going to be easy, though, however.
Yeah, I also don't see any translators complaining about not having to page those big old dictionaries anymore and get silly courses because we have the digital ones. Although I do have to say that my experience with the digital dictionaries that were set up by actual linguists happen to perform very differently to these large language models.
Yes.
So I wholeheartedly recommend those, approved by your Science Academy of choice. Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much. And we almost have a positive note to end on. Now we want to know, what do you think about resurrecting politicians who have passed away? What do you think about generative AI in general? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're already rummaging down there, give us a like and subscribe to our channel. This talk show is presented by Eurozine, and if you haven't heard of it, you should check it out right now, because this online magazine trades in a scarcity item, and that's insight. Eurozine publishes thoughtful long-form articles from more than 100 partner journals across dozens of European languages, and you have access to it for free. Display Europe is the force behind this project. It's a content-sharing platform that offers you articles, podcasts, and videos about European politics and culture in 15 languages. And yes, they don't abuse your user data. I know it's unbelievable. Go check them out at displayeurope.eu. This program is co-funded by the Creative Europe program of the European Union and the European Cultural Foundation. Importantly, the views and opinions expressed here are those of the speakers and authors only, and they do not necessarily reflect those of the European Union or the European Education and Culture Executive Agency. Neither the European Union nor the EACA can be held responsible for them. Not that we would mind them taking advice from us.